If you're actively trying to improve or push what you are capable of, it is very easy to fall into the trap of trying to do too much. If you're new here, my name is Jarle, and on Early Owl, we learn to be reasonable with ourselves. I first heard the phrasing Superman trap by Taimur on the podcast Not Overthinking. And I basically decided as soon as I heard that I wanted to make a video on it at some point because I just recognized myself in it in so many different ways. While it's good to believe in yourself, the Superman trap comes into play when you, to your own detriment, put a bit too much faith in your future self. I've come up with 3 different scenarios of how this can have a negative impact. The first one is that you can end up making things harder for yourself. The second one is that you overload your schedule. And the last one is that you just believe that your future self will be a better you. When I originally heard about the Superman trap, it was used in the context of making things harder for yourself in some way. They were talking about people who could afford it, but were reluctant to do things like getting, for example, a cleaner or a personal trainer, or kind of like hiring in some mentor or something to help with a specific problem. And the Superman trap in this case is that you're just kind of telling yourself, I don't need this extra help from someone because in theory, if I just did everything right and I just did everything perfectly, then I could be able to do it without the help. But then what happens often in reality is that with the help, you would have been able to do it. And in theory, without the help, you should have been able to do it. But at the end of the day, you didn't do it. Often when we think about weighing these types of things, we kind of think, is it possible for me to do it without it? And if it is, then it's useless. But in the reality, just because it's possible doesn't mean you're going to do it. But I think this concept of making it harder for ourselves goes a lot further than just like hiring people to help you. I think this applies to some extent to pretty much any kind of productivity tip or self-help technique you can think of, in the sense that you often approach it with the same mentality, like this thing might help, but I could also just not do the thing and still be productive, and then I don't need the thing. And while that would be true if you were Superman and you could just do the thing, none of us are Superman, and that's why these type of things work. I could bring up a bunch of different examples, but just to name one, there is things like self-restriction in various forms, like you could put your phone in a lock, or you can block websites, or you can put the phone in the other room. And these things work. If you just do them, they work. And if you have a problem with being distracted by a phone, for example, you can just do this and it just works. But the thing is, you can just tell yourself, oh, I can just have my phone in the room, but then just not use it. And that, for some people, that might work. But what happens to some people is that I think they don't employ these kinds of techniques because it seems kind of silly, because if you wanted to not use the phone, you could just not use it. But then they still end up using the phone to a way that kind of harms them or that is not good for them. The second thing that can easily happen is overloading your schedule. I'm definitely guilty of overloading my schedule in the past. And I think the thinking is kind of just, if I just do everything perfectly and I don't have any bad days and I don't have like any setbacks, then this should be completely fine. And that would be true, but then that's never the case. There's 2 main problems with this. One is that it can just lead to an unnecessary amount of stress and sometimes even lead to some form of burnout. And when setting up these types of schedules, it can often be for like a longer period. Like maybe you're planning out your school year, or you're like taking on 2 different jobs. You often get into situations that isn't just like an overloaded schedule for a week, but it's like for 6 months. And that's much more of a problem than just working really hard for a short period. The other issue is that cramming as much stuff in as possible isn't necessarily a good thing. It depends on the specifics or what your goals are. Like, let's say you're just trying to finish a degree as quickly as possible, then it might make sense to load up your coursework. But if you're actually trying to learn or improve at something, or maybe create something, then I don't think it makes as much sense to just fill up your schedule. Because it's much more important to have like a quality, deep understanding, or to have like some high impact hours, than it is to just do as much as possible all the time. I will also say though that I don't think it's always bad. And there has been times where I think I've learned a lot or grown a lot from kind of cramming a lot into my schedule. So it's not always bad. I think it's just something to be very careful with and make sure that what you're doing is for a specific reason and you know what that reason is. It's not just to kind of cram things in. I think one differentiator here is that at least one of the things you're kind of cramming into a overpopulated schedule would be something where it doesn't really matter if you do your best or what you get out of it. It's more just something you have to do. To take me as an example, I don't really regret staying in my bachelor's degree for programming while I had a full-time job, because at that point I didn't really care about what I learned from the degree anymore. I learned at the job, and it was more just about getting a degree, and how useful or useless that is up to anyone to decide, but I don't feel like I lost out on that much like growth or learning from it. But then on the other side, I've taken various art courses in the past, and at some points I have taken, I think, a bit too many art courses at once, and I made it through them all, but it was more just like I didn't have time to fully learn from every course, and I just ended kind of having to rush everything. And if I cared about getting the art diploma, that would make sense, but I didn't do these courses for the diploma or for completing them. I did them from learning. So in that case, I think I did myself a disservice by just kind of filling up my schedule because I could kind of handle it. The last scenario here is just believing that your future self will make it happen. The main way this comes up is that you have something to do or maybe some change you want to make, and you're just thinking, right now, today, it's not the day, but I think tomorrow or maybe next week or whatever arbitrary time you put in your head, that's when I'm going to do it. This one can be a bit devious because especially if there is some like hard deadline involved, then there might be some truth to it. There might be some truth to the fact that your current self doesn't feel like doing it, but your future self will somehow make it happen. This is something I've experienced both with like exams back when I was doing school and now also with YouTube videos where I sometimes just push them later and later until the future self just has to make it happen. But even if that is true and it does happen and it does kind of work out, that doesn't mean it's a good decision. The first problem is that it will just always lead to worse results. Like one thing is that obviously if you have to get it done in a short period of time, you need to rush it. But the other thing is whether it comes down to like learning or studying, or it comes down to like making or creating something. A big part of making it good is just having some breaks in between, like having some night's rest and just kind of sitting on it, and then you will get new ideas. Or in the case of learning something, it will just kind of imprint to your memory deeper. And that is something that is impossible to do if you just leave it to last minute and you just have to finish it in like 1 or 2 days. The second problem is that it just leads to a lot of completely unnecessary guilt or stress or bad times in the present. Because I think generally, if you know you have something upcoming that you need to get done, then pushing it away isn't going to make you just relax and chill out. It's going to be like you're just doing something to distract you from the thing you know you will be doing. But I think you often can just end up sitting there half miserable, not getting much out of your kind of time off, but also not making any progress on the thing you need to do. And it's a completely different feeling if you first finish the thing and you can feel good about that, and then you go on to do whatever relaxation you had in mind. The last thing, and this is a big one, at least for me, is that I think the stress of making it happen often leads to bad decisions. Like if I have to finish a YouTube video on time, I might stay up late and kind of mess up my sleep schedule just to finish it. And then on the Wednesday, when I've kind of gotten it out on time, I might be like, oh, this was kind of stressful because I had so little time and now I feel kind of tired. So even though I'm supposed to be on a diet and I'm supposed to be working out, I feel like today I can just kind of order some takeout and just lie in bed. And then that's what ends up happening. And then when I'm ahead of my schedule, that has the opposite effect, where I feel like more motivated to kind of do the right choices because I feel like things are generally heading in a good direction. So to all you supermen and superwomen out there, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to kind of have high expectation for yourself or try to do difficult things. But the problem more comes in when you're not really able to do that in the present, but you still expect yourself to keep up to that pace in the future. I'll try to find some videos related to being a super person and putting them in a playlist here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday.